Good afternoon, dear viewers. My name is Dr. Malcolm Athaide. She is the founder and managing director of Optus ESG. She is a senior business leader with over 30 years experience in climate change strategy and sustainability across industries. She has won several global recognition awards as Asia's top sustainability superwoman, sustainability leader of the year, and Asia's top and ranks as one of the top leaders among leading women in business sustainability. I have worked closely with her, and every time we come to this common topic of diversity management and inclusion, and I thought it is fair to have this discussion in today's Beyond the Boardroom episode. Thank you, Namita, for taking time today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Malcolm.
Okay, so Namita, thanks. Namita, to begin with, can you explain the benefits of why diversity and inclusion should be considered as a very important pillar of sustainability?
Thank you, Malcolm. So as I said, thanks a lot for inviting me to this platform. Truly appreciate. So to your question, first off, I think it is very important to understand the true meaning of sustainability. So sustainability, as we know, focuses on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And therefore, the whole concept of sustainability stands on this tripod, I would say, of economic, environmental, and social aspects, at whose core lies diversity and inclusion. So that somewhere is the connect. And from a business standpoint, I think sustainability would be explained as ensuring long-term business success by contributing towards economic and social development, a healthy environment, and a stable society. And to be able to do this, approaches need to be inclusive, embedded by diversity. So given that gender is at the core of environmental and social development and is identified as a common measure of diversity driven by inclusion, the aggregate positive effects on it adds up to uphold the underlying principles of sustainability. And we've seen, data has shown that diversity and inclusivity is very deeply linked with women empowerment. And that, so we've seen how the society chooses boys over girls, men over women, from health to education to empowerment. When it comes to even basic education of one's children, the boys get preference, and it is believed that because the boy is going to provide for the family while the girl will be married off and be a part of another family, so she doesn't need education. So lack of education restricts the abilities to get formal jobs. Illiteracy among women, rural, more higher than rural men. Illiteracy. And urban women also have seen, while there's not a marked distinction between rural and urban women may be a little better off. And when climate shocks occur, the vulnerability of women drastically go up. So there is, and that is the deep linkage between how sustainability, diversity, and inclusion really operates. And in the broader context, it is like a cause-effect relationship wherein sustainability is the cause which drives equality, and at the same time also the effect which ultimately ensures diversity and inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you, Namita. I think that's a very lucid explanation. I wanted to just catch on one of the threads that you mentioned about in terms of the benefits of in the business practices. So I just wanted to, if you could expand on the benefits of equality, diversity, and inclusion in today's business practices that we see very often across in India as well as across the globe.
I say, considering equality, diversity, and inclusion, this certainly presents a very strong social agenda, but I think it also addresses the biggest motive and the challenge for business, that is creating growth. Ultimately, as entrepreneurs or as business people, that's the core, and that's at the bottom of everything, right? So long-term business success in this millennial driven scenario is no longer solely determined by revenues. We know that. It also relies on other parameters such as equality, diversity, inclusion. We know how many questions these days the younger people ask when they're interviewing about diversity or inclusion strategies of a company. Look at what is the CSR that the company does, so on and so forth. So this has become the watchword for the coming generation. And in order to attract talent, businesses have to align internal practices with the environmental developments or the external environment that is really emerging or evolving. And moreover, if you look at a team's composition within a company or a firm, that reflects the target customers. To your question, equality, diversity, and inclusion clubbed together and even as separate entities have their own materiality and business benefits. Now, these factors also pave for a dynamic future and offer a chance to explore the unexplored repository of talent that businesses. So I'm here talking about talent attraction that businesses are looking to do. And this is, there is demonstrated evidence to show that how these two elements have become assets for any business and are leading to better performances. All these factors combined contribute to positive business growth. High functioning, diverse teams reflect and harness workplace sustainability. Specifics may vary, of course, from organization to organizations, but the results of inclusivity, I think, are loud and clear. Thanks.
Thanks, Namita. That is quite insightful. I want to get into a very specific question. Maybe while we've looked at it from a broad perspective, if I have to actually talk about the business which I am in, we do quick, easy, insightful loans for all these informal and self-employed businesses and households. So we are trying to aid sustainability through access to better living conditions and moving to a better home. We've seen the primary benefit of that movement happens to be the woman of the household, where actually she moves in from a very, very difficult setup to a much more formal and organized setup. However, we've seen it is very difficult for them, even though they may be the primary wage earner. It's very difficult for them to make a financial decision, even though they are quite important stakeholders and actually decision makers in getting a home. So how do you suggest we overcome this barrier?
Yeah, see, I believe, Malcolm, for women to be financially sound and in the decision-making seat, there are multiple challenges that need to be addressed. Of course, we live in a male-dominated society, and I always say that we are, women in the corporate world who have, come to these levels of top management. They're very far and few, and there are many more that need to be added. But I think from a financial perspective of decision-making, I think one of the first things that need to be done is focused approach towards reducing the unbanked and the underbanked women population. This population is about 62% and over 400 million. And there have been schemes which have been instrumental in bringing, women or poor, the rural poor or the urban poor, closer to the formal financial sector and services. But the impact of such initiatives on women's financial inclusion is an access to resources like education on products, on financial products. Access to finance, technologies that help progress are very, very critical. It is also important to innovate on alternative financing mechanisms to increase uptake of the primary. I think it's also about institutions' role to see how do you include women and provide the kind of technology, say in Agrim's case, identifying areas like green affordable housing and educating women on its reasoning. I think that is very, very important. Advantages and saving potentials would go a long way in bringing in more and more women borrowers to make decisions. I think decision making needs to be supported more and more with that reasoning, I would say, and a balanced approach towards what is required and how that is going to benefit the family. Because another thing which I want to highlight here is empowering women who are affected by humanitarian crisis through blockchain technologies. And this is a very interesting thing that UN Women are doing. They're using blockchain technology to create and store verifiable digital identities of refugees and enabling trackable and inexpensive cash transfers, which is assisting women and girls in the humanitarian setting. And this is a great example of inclusion and technology usage. So through their resilience and empowerment centers at the UN Women, they're providing cash for work programs, skill training, and livelihood opportunities to refugee women. I think a similar model is very scalable in the Indian context. So, for supporting women's financial needs, financial products which build in concessionalities or interest subventions, say linking linking all this to a certain learning parameter, I think this would go a big way in helping women arrive at decision making and come forward in spite of being the earning members, come forward and actually take those decisions. Because
thanks, Namita. Very practical solutions. I believe every leader in the business of small loans will find this quite useful. I'll just take a leap of what you said, and just having said that, Agrim has started that every customer that we lend to for a home loan. I think last but not the least, Namita, this is your favorite topic. You always talk about green banking and green financials. If you can give us a short brief on what are the top ways that we can practice green banking today?
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, green banking is very close to my heart. So you picked up the right topic here, Malcolm. So see, a common belief is that anything green has to do with promoting just environmental activities or benefits. But that's not true, because green has as much to do with the social sustainability as it impacts many parameters. And green banking, therefore, could be defined as a provision of banking services after carefully considering ecological and social factors. So if you remember, we used to practice that under the ESG policy that we had, and to promote and defend environment and thereby establish a social responsibility of an institution. I think that is very, very important. In emerging markets like India, where growth and development mostly supported by the industrial sector has picked up pace, it becomes a major challenge to control the impact of business on environment. But as banks are the providers of capital, I think they play a very critical role and have to be mindful in how they channelize the capital and how they play a role in greening the system by enhancing availability of finance and serving the needs of a green economy. I think this calls for, at one level, integrating ESG into lending, because it's important to see what is the kind of ultimate impact that dollar or the rupee is making of the lending, the debt that is being plowed in. Investing in projects that have positive impact ultimately. And then innovating on banking products, that's also very important for the bottom of the pyramid, because we are not just talking about green as in environment, we're talking about also the social. So I did see the way Agrim has a product for home loans. Banks need to align their products to net zero objectives, for example, to help the economy make more resilient. And I think we need mammoth responses to the challenges that we are seeing today. And green banking is like more holistic, where it is in a way incentivizing customers in any form or any way to be able to create that green positive impact. And unless and until banks start asking questions even for borrowers on their green data, if the demand is not there, the supply won't come around, So I think that is more about green banking, and there are many examples that we can learn from across the world. There's one last point I want to make, and that is about just transition, because it's about inclusion that we spoke about. Green banking or diversity or inclusion, all this is very deeply connected to just and equitable transition. So, it is important that while we undertake transition or while we, engage in green banking, nobody needs to be left out. So we have to carry everybody along. And that is what is very, very important. So increasing green finance, building resilience in the long term with a just transition kind of an approach is, I would say, the new green banking is evolving. Thank you.
So I think this was a wonderful session. I enjoyed it as much as we always keep talking about. And thank you again for sparing your valuable time to speak on this platform today. Thanks a lot, Namita.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, for inviting me. I also enjoyed it, and I hope it's going to be useful, and happy to connect on anything that you wish. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.